was on the line. So the next day, Connecticut's Roger Sherman came back with the idea of a bicameral legislature, which is a fancy way of saying two houses in one Congress. So now, to go along with the House of Representatives, there would be a Senate. The House would have proportional representation based on population. That made the nationalists happy. And the Senate was the compromise. There, each state, big and small, would have 2 representatives. So Delaware would get the same number of votes in the Senate as Virginia. This made the Federalists happy. This is all in Article 1. If you look closely, you'll see another big compromise, right here. 3/5 of all other persons.
Probably the biggest consideration regarding slavery in the Constitution is what's known as the Three-Fifths Compromise.
Other persons was a code that everyone in the room understood. It meant slaves. And slaves were counted as 3/5 of a person. To the framers, this wasn't a direct statement about a person's value as a human being. Equality, the end of slavery, they weren't there to talk about that. This was all about the power some states would have in the new Congress. If slaves were counted, even though they were slaves, then southern states would get more representatives in the House. Northerners didn't want slaves to count as whole persons because then the southern states would have more power.
Half or more of the population in many of those southern states were slaves. So it means the more slaves the state has, the more political power it has.
So in Philadelphia, the founders decided that almost everyone in the population would be counted. Not everyone counted would have rights or could even vote.
The framers of the Constitution, the leaders of the Revolution, had a very limited idea about who was entitled to political rights. They did not believe in democracy. They did not believe that every man should have the vote. They certainly didn't believe that women should have the vote. They didn't believe that African Americans should have the vote. To have a vote in the 18th century, you had to have what they called a stake in society. Because you had to have property, because it was their theory that you would make irresponsible decisions if you didn't have anything to lose.
They didn't get some things right, and clearly we now realize that and many framers then realized that slavery was evil and should not be protected by our legal system. At the same time, it showed that they had to make compromises to get the Constitution through. If the Constitution actually prohibited slavery in 1788 and 1790, it probably never would have been ratified by the southern states, and we would not have had a Constitution at all. So you can also see sort of the practical aspect of people willing to make compromises, sometimes against the principles they believed in.
They were making it up as they went along. And they were making compromises for purely political reasons to get an agreement. They didn't believe for a moment it was an ideal constitution. It was simply the best one they could get in the circumstances.
The story of the Constitution is too often told without acknowledging its problems.